this time, people may close.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is I'm sure you're happy to hear, this is the last time you'll be hearing from us. This is the rebuttal. So the main point of rebuttal is to basically rebut points and statements that the defense brought out. I won't be going through all the evidence again. My co-counsel did a very, very, very thorough job of it. And the reason she was so thorough and spent the amount of days that she did was because every detail in this case matters. Every single detail matters. And it's those details and those points that have been brought out, the statements from witnesses that have come out, the evidence you've been shown, that when you put it all together, it forms a picture of what really happened. And it shows you the involvement that the defendant had in conspiring to kill Fabio. It was pointed out many, many times, it's never one piece of evidence. It's the collective effort of all the evidence that you saw over the last few weeks, months, I should say, a couple months, that points to the guilt of the defendant. The defense started this opening with, "This is just an affair." And that has been the theme continuously from the defense the entire trial. This is just an affair. She didn't know anything about it. And they've stated it in closing. Again, it became the theme. This is just an affair. But this is a lot more than just an affair. And I think you've seen that through the testimony and the evidence that's been presented to you. An affair, although is not condoned by most people, is about lies. We have that. It's about deceit. You're deceiving people. You're deceiving your family. You're deceiving your loved ones. But this one takes it to another level. There's planning involved here. We have where we started with an affair and the deceit and the lies that are part of having an affair. But that went a step further. They started talking about their future, where they're going to live when the kids are out of the house, where they're going to travel to. They started planning. This affair turned to murder. That was one obstacle, the obstacle that stood in the way of the happiness of the defendant and Baker. This wasn't just an affair. We've used the terms sick, twisted. That's what it was. You saw a lot of evidence to a lot of conduct, a lot of statements of what these two meant to each other. They meant everything to each other. Even after Robert Baker is arrested, Monica is arrested, they continue the same kind of talk. In fact, one could say it intensified because now they're in it together, ride or die. That means something to them. Ride or die, Bonnie and Clyde. They're in this together forever. They started this affair and they're going to see it through until the end, and that means being together at any cost. And finally, you end this affair with the cover-up. There was a lot of cover-up in this case. So once again, I emphasize to you that this isn't just an affair. What may have started as an affair turned into something a lot more deadly. You know through the evidence that this affair started around early 2016, maybe into 2015 when the defendant joined the racquetball club. And you knew that she was already looking. So this fairy tale of a happy marriage was a farce. It didn't exist. She was already looking. She tried with Matt Nurse and was rejected. So it's actually the defendant who started this entire scenario, why we're all here. She was not happy in her marriage. She told Matt Nurse she was not happy in her marriage. But that affair then began with Robert Baker, and it quickly started escalating. And it's the escalation of this affair that ultimately turns deadly. And it escalated to by March. She was so bold. The risks were being taken now. They were going out in public, in Los Angeles, in the area, on double dates with another couple, while she was married to Fabio. While she lived at home with her husband and kids, she's going out to dinner. It's getting bolder, riskier. She goes to Vegas then in July of 2016. And keep in mind, this trip to Vegas was with her husband. She went with her husband, Fabio, while she's having an affair with Baker, to a work event in Las Vegas. And she couldn't even go away for one weekend. Not one weekend with her husband without inviting Baker to come along. So what began as a trip with her and her husband to Vegas now turned into a trip for her to see her boyfriend, her lover. And she couldn't even spend time with her husband and wait. She couldn't wait to get away from him. The minute he went to another meeting at another hotel, she was with Baker. This public persona that she has presented to her family and her friends is all a lie. And the defense had her daughter, Jessica, on the stand and had Jessica talk about this wonderful video that she took of her parents. And you know what? It's really sad. It's sad for Jessica that they're doing that to her. That she filmed this video of her parents dancing. And even this many years later, she's in court supporting her mother, who she wants to believe in, she wants to trust, because of course her father's been murdered. No child wants to believe that her mother is the one that murdered her father. And she's showing you all this video saying, look how happy my parents were. And you know what? She probably believed it. I don't think she's lying. But that video that was filmed in October, and I think the next one was December, January, that time frame, when Jessica's believing her mom and dad are so happy, her mom is telling Fabio, good night, I love you, while he's out of town, sneaking out of the house, going over to Baker's, dressing up in sexy outfits and taking photos. Her mother, again, the time frame when she's videoing her parents so happy, is providing the password for her home surveillance system to Robert Baker so that he can watch them. They're teen girls coming and going. Her mother was going out with Baker while Fabio's out of town during the same time frame, during all these videos, bringing him back to her house, having him sleep in her marital bed, and the daughter finds her in the morning, and then she lies to her and says, oh, Sheila was here too, when you now know through the evidence nobody else was there. She went out partying with Baker, brought him home, and he slept in her bed. During the same time that they're filming the videos of her happy parents, the defendant's sending the itineraries of Fabio every time he goes out of town to Baker. But again, you bring your daughter in here and you let her get on the stand and testify how happy and loving her parents were when she knew none of this. But this affair kept escalating. It didn't just end with, I want to be with Robert Baker, we're having a great time. And I think the defense made a statement about, she didn't need to kill Fabio. She was happy with the way things were. Well, she wasn't. Why? Because she wasn't Mrs. Baker yet. How much more evidence do you have to see to know that she wanted to be Mrs. Baker? That was her ultimate goal. She wasn't happy with how things were. Fabio was the barrier to that happiness. And this is November of 2016 when she wrote Mrs. Baker on the mirror. And I'm a little shocked that the defense even insinuated that Robert Baker, you see a black bar there, that's because she was naked from the waist down. So Robert Baker said, take off your underwear right now, grab your lipstick and write Mrs. Baker on the mirror. Completely unreasonable. Back to our reasonable instruction. That's a completely unreasonable assumption. She wrote that because she wanted to. And how do we know that? Because as it continued, as the affair continued and she's arrested, Mrs. Baker continued. How many letters from jail when she called herself Mrs. Baker? For eternity. Mrs. Robert L. Baker. That's the goal. This is after she's been told that Robert Baker's DNA has been found all over her house. She's still continuing this because she's been in on it the whole time. She's so detached from the murder of Fabio when it happens because it's already been in motion. This has been her goal. This is a good time for her. That's why you see her out celebrating with Robert Baker. She's the opposite of mourning. Now she's closer to that goal of getting what she's wanted for all these months, to be Mrs. Baker. We get to Robert Baker, and defense from the beginning, again in opening, consistently has told you that this is all Robert Baker. Well, what are they going to say? Obviously, the defendant's on trial. Robert Baker's pled. We all know his role in the murder. So now it has to be all Robert Baker's fault. And he's this master manipulator. I think the words were, he had total control over that woman. What evidence did you see in this trial anywhere that he had total control over that woman? The evidence actually showed the opposite. She did what she wanted, when she wanted, and she didn't care. She didn't care that her daughters were upset. She didn't care that her mother was upset. She didn't care that her sister, her friends were upset. She did what she wanted. And this master manipulator, there's been a lot of conversation back and forth between my co-counsel and defense about whether he's dumb or not dumb. What I will say about Robert Baker is he's not the evil genius behind the curtain. He's not. This is a man who answered true to answers on the witness stand. This is the guy who, when he did kill Fabio, he cut his own hand and ran around the house dripping his blood everywhere, leaving a trail everywhere that it was him. Then furthermore, he got into Fabio's car, drove off in the Porsche, and dripped blood in the Porsche. This guy is not capable of setting this whole thing up. There has to be brains behind this. No one's ever said the defendant isn't smart or cunning or manipulative, because that's exactly what she is. And for Robert Baker to figure this out, he needed to know the timing. He needed to know when he could go there. And that story about we talked every day, I knew her schedule, that's not enough to bank on. He needed to be told, like Austin told you, when to go. It's go time. Let's go. Remember how he hurried up Austin? He said, let's go. Austin told you. He said, let's go. We got to go. It was a rush because that window was small. And that's the whole point. Remember, this murder wasn't supposed to happen on the 23rd. So that's the new game changer. There's a new plan. The defendant made herself unavailable. She knew the Friday before Jessica would be babysitting that Monday at 4. She knew Bella had an interview at 4, and she made herself unavailable at 4 and out of the house. The window was 4. He's jogging up the hill at 4:18. Furthermore, he had to know he could get in the house. What was his plan? What was his plan if all the doors are locked? Did anyone ever think about that? If the defendant had nothing to do with this, what happens when you get there and all the doors are locked? As Austin told you, she said to him, the front door will be unlocked. And they went right through the front door. This backdoor theory that the defense has presented to you in his argument is a theory. There's no evidence whatsoever that supported any backdoor entry. None. He also needed to know to take the DVR box. How would he think to take the DVR box? Okay, he had access. Yes, he knew about that, right? Which is already weird in itself. And you have to ask yourself, why does he even have access to watch the comings and goings of the Sementilli family? But he has to know to take the DVR box, and he has to know where it is. Now, we know he's been in her house because he's been in there and he's slept with her in her own house twice. The second time being, again, when Fabio was out of town and they were on their Vegas trip together, husband and wife, when Baker showed up, and then she came back with Baker in Austin. So we do know that Baker's been there twice, sleeping with her in the house while Fabio was still alive. But again, no evidence he would have known where that DVR box was. The Porsche keys. How would he ever have known that the Porsche keys were kept in that drawer where the blood was, where that 12 placard was? The answers to all these are obvious. She told him. She gave him that information. This was what you call an inside job. He had knowledge of this. He had to get it from somewhere. That's the only reasonable conclusion you can come to, is that he was given that information by the defendant. Defense counsel also brought up this letter that he wrote in August of 2023, and I want to point something out. It's not like when you compare Austin and Baker to each other, there's really no comparison. They committed a crime together, but it's very obvious that they had different mental states and different roles. That doesn't mean you have to believe everything each of them says or you want to be their best friend, but they're two very different people. When we talk about control, there was control over Austin to a degree. There was a large age gap. Austin had grown up really idolizing Rob Baker. But when you really look at it, the two of them, there's a big difference in them and their roles and why they did it. And they've both pled. They're both going to be in prison for quite a long time. And I'll get to that in a little bit about the difference between that. But when he writes this letter in August of 2023, now for 6 years, Baker maintained his innocence. So let's remember that. He pleaded not guilty, and he remained steadfast on not guilty for 6 years. It wasn't until August of 2023 that he pled. And we talked about that plea, and Mr. Levine brought up the plea agreement. And let me be clear on that. That was an open plea agreement to the court. That was not a negotiated plea with the DA's office. And there's been all this talk about he didn't take a deal. He was never offered a deal. Let me repeat that. Mr. Baker was never offered any way, shape, or form of a deal by the DA's office. So when he pled to the charges to the court. Judge Cohen took the plea. And during those pleas, why didn't he say who the co-conspirator was? Why didn't he say what the overt act was he was committed? That's not how a plea works. You plead to the charge, Judge Cohen took it, and then you're sentenced. And I want to point out, when he pled to the charge, he pled to murder in the first degree, which we all know is the premeditated murder. He also pled to, as has been told to you already, he pled to the fiduciary gain, or financial gain. Keep in mind, he pled to financial gain. What financial gain would Robert Baker ever get from this? He wouldn't, unless she gave him money. So when he pled guilty, I plead guilty that I did this murder for financial gain. I admit that that's why I did it, is what he's saying to you. He's not getting any money unless she's promised it to him. Same with the conspiracy. When he pled guilty to conspiracy, I conspired. That's 2 or more people. Austin wasn't even arrested. Austin's name wasn't even on a table. Austin wasn't identified as the second killer, but he pled guilty to the conspiracy. And again, during the plea, they don't ask you the names of these questions aren't asked. So I want to be clear on that so that you're not misled during this plea and how it came about with Mr. Baker. The letter that he wrote then, after he pled, he wrote this self-serving letter. And I say self-serving because it was ridiculous, and even Mr. Baker got on the stand and said, yeah, it was a lie. So we know that Mr. Baker's lied over and over and over again. And in that letter, he came up with a story after, 7 years of thinking about this. The best that he could come up with in 7 years was, Dear Monica, I broke into your house to kill Fabio because I wanted to leave a birthday present under your pillow. And Fabio snuck up behind me and attacked me, and I must have stabbed him. I don't really remember. I blacked out. That's what he came up with after 7 years of being in custody. And he wrote that letter and gave it to the defense, and the defense asserts he didn't know it would end up with a prosecution. Of course he did. Of course he did, because during these 7 years, as you saw, their jail mail has all been confiscated. Their phone calls have been tracked and turned over. He knows all this because once it's done, it's turned over to the defense. The defense tells them, and there's calls and letters saying from the lawyers, stop talking to each other. Stop writing to each other. Because the DA's getting it all. And just like happened, we used it in court. So again, when the defense says there's been no communication since she found out he was the killer in 2018, what changed in 2018? I don't remember anyone telling you what changed in 2018 that's when he decided to stop communicating, or she decided to stop communicating. She knew about the DNA when they were arrested in 2017. So why did it take a year to stop communicating? What changed? Again, nothing. Nothing changed except the lawyers saying, stop. You guys are going to get yourselves in trouble. All this stuff's getting confiscated. It looks really bad because you know what? It is bad. Because they didn't care. They didn't care because this was a plan that they had together and they were going to see it through to the end. Ride or die for eternity, linked and synced. The divorce versus death, and I'm not going to go through all that. I promise you I won't. But the reason that you heard from Ms. Ebersbacher is because the defense was going to say always what they said. She could have just divorced him. She had no reason to kill him. She could have just divorced him. And we knew that argument was coming because that's a logical argument to make if you were the defense, just like they said. She didn't have to kill him. She could have just left him. Although they did maintain that she was happy in her marriage. She's happy the way things were. But they also gave the caveat of, but she could have divorced him. Well, we know divorce wasn't an option. There's social barriers to why divorce wasn't an option. The family would never accept it. The defense and the prosecution agree on these issues. They're never going to accept her leaving Fabio Sementilli, this man loved by everybody. And when I say everybody, everybody. They're never going to accept it for her to go to this porn star 55-year-old man who lives in an apartment in Canoga Park, who is a racquetball league coordinator as his hobby job, I think he referred to it as, who has no money to his name, and oh, by the way, has, I lost count of it, 6 or 7 felony convictions for sexual assault of a 14-year-old. Never going to accept that. But there is a financial aspect. So even if you're going to get over the social barrier, which she couldn't, she knew she couldn't. Financially, what's better off? That's why Ms. Ebersbacher prepared that table to show you that here's the estimate of what divorce would be. Here's an estimate what death would be. So that if this comes up, you can see the difference. But the one glaring point that cannot be ignored is life insurance. You have to die. You get a lump sum of money. If you die, you get life insurance. There's no mediation. There's no going to court because it's a contested divorce. There's no variables about spousal support. And by the way, Ms. Ebersbacher did touch on spousal support and said, I can't put it in because I don't know what it would be, which is a fair statement. She doesn't know. There's all these variables with divorce that are unknown, but what is the one known thing? When you die and you have life insurance, you get a lump sum. There you go. That's probably as far as the defendant was thinking, quite honestly. But nevertheless, Mr. Malatesta came into court, and he testified for you. But what was ironic with the testimony of Mr. Malatesta is he came in under the presumption that he was going to rebut Marie Ebersbacher, the forensic accountant, on the death versus divorce. His credentials, though, was Melrose Place, Cheers, myself, Law and Order. He rambled on and on about that. So right at the very beginning, there's a little skeptical about why he's here. He told you he worked as a mediator now, but when I questioned him, and again, this is always coming out on cross-exam, he's never testified as an expert in criminal court as a divorce expert. Family accountant. Never. Never done it. So you're going to start with a murder trial with a couple days' notice. He said, I'm not an estate lawyer. I'm not here to testify about divorce. So you're basically coming in, hired by the defense, one-sided, to talk about the benefits of a divorce. I'm sorry, I'm not going to testify about death. The benefits of divorce. But you are not equipped to compare it to death. So what's the point here? What is the point here? And again, you don't know the Sementillis. You don't know their situation. You could estimate, which is what he did, and said, I'm going to put a number of $90,000 for 10 years, and he came up with a number. And again, on cross, I had to say, does that mean that she never has to work, she doesn't have to do anything? Because I think this is a big part. The defendant wants the money, the lump sum, the life insurance. She doesn't have to work, she can continue her life and go be Mrs. Baker. It's easy. But Mr. Malatesta opined these things, but he hadn't talked to anybody. He only gave you, what we really got was that his guess of $90,000 for 10 years. $7,500. Jason Rubin came in, and again, called by the defense, and the first thing that he said to you, which should have caused a little bit of concern, is, I have 2 careers. All right, well, which career are you here for? And he said, I am a fiduciary to administer the estate of Fabio, and I'm a forensic accountant. Okay? His real goal was, again, to dispute Marie Ebersbacher. He talked to you about, oh yeah, I talked to Ms. Ebersbacher about that chart. Defense never asked Ms. Ebersbacher about this case because, in fact, I think she testified to, I got documents from the probate. She's doing the analysis. All they do is they provide documents from the estate. She has no reason to have to talk to Mr. Rubin about her own job. He provides the documents. She prepares the report. But when he comes in here, there's a clear conflict of interest in what's going on now. You were hired by the estate, whether it be Luigi or somebody else. This was years ago when Fabio was murdered. You were hired by the estate to administer the probate estate. That's your job. So why are you coming in testifying for the defense based on things that are way out of that lane? Way out of that lane. Asked about alimony. He started opining on alimony and then finally conceded that he's not an expert. Shouldn't be talking about alimony. A couple times he used the terms, in Monica's mind. Why in the world, if you're hired as a probate administrator, are you ever coming into a criminal murder trial, hired by the defense, testifying to things such as, I was doing this in Monica's mind, I believe. Completely inappropriate, complete conflict of interest, whether he denies it or not. The stock options was really boring, I know that. We all got a little sleepy on that. But the point was to show you that he almost blew that deadline twice. Let's give him the first one, right? Okay, the first one, he said, well, I didn't know about it. Procter & Gamble didn't tell me. Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of documents. Give him the benefit of the doubt. They did then say, hey, your first, they're going to expire, and this is why I went through this. The second said, he almost lost him. Procter & Gamble sent a letter saying, hey, it's happening again. We don't have an obligation to send you this letter, but we are. They're going to expire. You better exercise them. But his smug answer every time I asked him was, well, I exercised him. He couldn't even concede that you almost blew the deadline. You know what happens? And I asked him, when you don't exercise these options, well, the answer is you lose it. They expire. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to the estate he would have lost had not those letters come through. He was completely unprepared to testify. I get 300 plus emails. I have a lot of clients. I think that between him and Mr. Malatesta, they thought, hey, this is pretty cool. I get to come to court. I'm going to testify in this big murder trial. Hey, defense, what are you asking me? I'm going to ask you this. Great. Completely unprepared for any cross-examination, completely unprepared to answer any questions that were not already told that were going to be asked to him. Another thing that he did was he went into Ms. Ebersbacher's chart and he started saying, oh, her numbers about death versus divorce, they're completely wrong because she didn't value this side company. I know that you guys didn't know a lot about this side company. It was another detour that we took in the trial, but there was a side company, as you heard the evidence, that Fabio was an investor in an app, right? And part of that was a bigger company, as you heard the testimony, and it's Wella was paying this scissor boy company, and then part of that, Fabio got a part of that, right? Well, Mr. Rubin, on his own, says Ms. Ebersbacher's wrong, and again, we were going round and round about numbers that were probably pretty boring to everybody, and said, I'm going to estimate this as a $385,343 win for the divorce side. That's how much that she didn't put in there, and she's wrong, and she doesn't know what she's doing. So he came up with this number. Again, it got into, I took a 30% from this, that, whatever. But nothing was based on any financial documents other than I looked at some emails. It was very strange how he came up with this number, right? But what was not strange is ultimately, and this was on direct exam, he told you, we, the probate administrators, settled that company for $25,000. Settled the whole thing for $25,000. So how can you come in and estimate the value of that company at Fabio's share at $385,000 when you settled it? And that's a fact. I settled it for $25,000. And then again, take 50% off that for divorce, which he didn't do. Again, numbers, not the end all of this trial, but I just want to show you that these defense witnesses who come in and spin these things and tell you these different versions and that prosecution witnesses are wrong are meant to distract you from the evidence in the case and the truth of the case. Does this change the fact that the defendant conspired to kill Fabio? Not at all. But we can't let that go because it's important that you know who the witnesses are that are testifying to you. And at the end of the day, again,